We had a story we wanted to take a closer look at this week. And of course, we're going to be talking about Intel because if you haven't been paying attention, we've talked at length about them this year. They're trying to turn that ship and add more profitability to the ledger. And one of the things that we have discussed is how one of their biggest crown jewels is the Foundry business. It has been the recipient of a large amount of government funding through the CHIPS Act. It's also trying to play catch up with TSMC and several others. Now, news broke yesterday that Intel has announced that their foundry business will be spun off into a separate subsidiary entity. The new unit will have its own board and be free to seek outside funding, including a potential IPO down the road. Intel stock jumped 8% in after hours trading on this news, and this is just the latest in a long string of changes at the tech giant under the helm of Mr. Pat Gelsinger. Now, I know it seems like we cover Intel every other week on the rundown, but given the gravity of what they have to do in the industry, I thought this was a big story that we needed to spend a little bit of time talking about. So, John, I'm going to start with you. Do you think Intel spinning out their foundry business is going to be a good move in the long run?
Well, in the short run, the street thinks so. I think in the long run, probably it is. They have to do something drastic. They've been trying to do things drastically for the last couple of years. I'm a big fan of Pat Gelsinger, but I think in a sense he's kind of in the same spot that Marissa Mayer was in with Yahoo, except this isn't quite as bad as that. It's almost a no-win situation. So he's inherited this company that we all can agree on that missed its opportunities along the way and has fallen behind, and now it's drastically trying anything and everything that will stick to the wall. Uh, so I, in a sense, applaud him, and I also think this is something he has to do. He has to do something dramatic because I'm not sure how long the clock is going to be ticking on his CEO stewardship.
So, it's an interesting spot that Pat's in because he inherited a company that quite honestly was mismanaged by Bob Swan. Bob just wanted revenue, whatever it took to get the revenue, spend however much money it takes to make the revenue numbers go up. And the problem with that is that when a company has high revenue numbers, people get addicted to that, right? Oh, we want to see big numbers coming out of Intel. And unfortunately, those people are the ones that control the stock. You know what it reminds me of? It's the people who walk into the gym on January 1st and are upset on January 15th when they don't have a six pack of abs and they have, big, well defined muscles. They do know that this takes time, right? Those people, funny enough, work on Wall Street because they believe that every company in the world should be able to execute a massive turnaround plan in about 3 months. Because if you can't do things on a quarter by quarter basis, then you're useless and we need to fire you and we need to get rid of you and all this other stuff. And does that sound like the kind of people that you want to work for? Because it doesn't sound like the people that I want to work for. Foundries can't be done in 3 months. I think I even said on a previous episode of the rundown, it doesn't matter how many resources you throw at this. A foundry cannot be built in 3 months. It can barely be built in 3 years. And the problem is that Pat is facing strong headwinds from the people who control the purse strings, aka the Wall Street folks. So he needs to create a win. And this is not the win that I think he wanted to create, but it's the one that will get people off of his back for a little bit. Because this is a cautionary tale about a former tech giant who overinvested in technologies that maybe they weren't ready for, and they were headed down the tubes really fast. And what they needed was Wall Street to get off their back for a few minutes for them to be able to make that massive turnaround. And quite honestly, the best thing that happened to them was when Wall Street basically forgot about them for a few years and let them execute that turnaround in private. And then they came out on the other side a much better, stronger, healthier company. And I'm not talking about Intel, I'm talking about IBM. Because the exact same thing happened to IBM. If you'll remember, the string of failures that were OS2 Warp and Blue Lightning and every other thing, it made Wall Street angry. And when Wall Street gets angry, they give you really short deadlines. It's like when you tell your teenagers that they have to be back exactly at 10:29 or they're going to get grounded. No teenager is going to be back right on the minute. And so they need this time to recover. Getting the foundry business out from underneath Intel and not letting that impact their bottom line means that Pat can do a little bit more restructuring, get rid of some of those things that maybe they shouldn't have invested in. But like you said, he inherited a bad situation. I think he's still doing as much as he can with it, especially now that everybody in the world is just going gaga for the leather jacket AI guru. And he like you said, all he has to do is show up on stage and say, "Hello, my name is Jensen Wong and I'm here at company name." And they just bought a whole bunch of stuff from us to do thing that they said they're going to do. Like that's easy street. Like what's going to happen when that doesn't happen with AI anymore? What happens when the either the bottom falls out of the market or there are so many new entrants into the market that suddenly you have to actually work for a living? Well, then you're going to look a lot like Pat Gelsinger. You're going to be busy trying to figure out how to keep this ship profitable. And I don't want this to kind of turn into a cheerleading session for Pat, but what I want people to understand is that you need to give companies that are this big a little bit more time to unwind these things. And getting rid of the foundries is probably the best thing they can do right now because somebody will invest in those foundries. That is a given because they're going to want that money and they're going to want that revenue stream. The question is, will the people who invest in those foundries have a little bit more patience than the people who are currently beating the door down in Intel trying to get their money back?
You mentioned the 90-day shot clock, right? That is the bane of any CEO. Wall Street, they're impatient. Man, I used to be a financial journalist before I came over here, and the pressure these guys are under and the unrealistic expectations is incredible. And you compound that with, as you mentioned, Bob Swan's mismanagement of the company. Oh, and throw in the fact that they're late to the party with mobile and AI, and you have this toxic stew, which is almost impossible to get rid of the stench. And Pat, in a sense, is running whack-a-mole style from one issue to another to another. This, as you said, Tom, will maybe free him up. Maybe it creates some sort of positive news they need. Now, on the flip side, you mentioned our friend Jensen. He's shown up everywhere at everything. He's the Forrest Gump of AI movement. Well, that's going to work for a while until it doesn't. What I mean is, when there are cracks in the fissure, when there are cracks of I don't know, the Nvidia being investigated, that's another story, or the fact that they don't meet their ROI numbers, which Wall Street dinged them for, as you remember, and their stock took a hit. Those are going to inevitably happen. And if AI doesn't take off very, very soon in terms of revenue, as reported by companies, he's going to find himself not quite as of an issue as Pat Gelsinger is in, but he's going to start feeling some of the pain of not meeting expectations because Wall Street's a very cruel and I'd say unrealistic place.
I will remind everybody out there as well that when you are the scrappy underdog, you can take lots of risks and maybe a few gambles to get where you're at. And it wasn't that long ago that Nvidia was a floundering company that was trying to pivot their gaming business into something more enterprise focused because they knew they couldn't sell these massive gaming graphics cards to people forever. And now that they're at the top of the hill and they are the clear leader in the market, do you think Wall Street wants them to take a gamble or a risk on anything? No, they want companies like that to play it safe and continue to produce, 12% year over year growth and bump the stock price and pay a dividend every once in a while. And they get punished when they try to do things like that. Kind of like Intel did. The good news is that when those companies fall off the top of the mountain, like Intel did, they stop getting the attention, which means they can go back to taking those risks. And then you can go, ooh, yeah, that was a really good move. I don't know where that came from. I'm so glad that Intel's back. And the cycle just perpetuates itself over and over again. All of this has happened before. All of this will happen again.
In Hollywood,
I,
oh, I was going to mention in Hollywood they have the rags to riches to rags story. Silicon
mhm.
Valley has the same thing. I just wanted to throw that in.
No, you're absolutely right. And I hope that we're Pat's on the way out of the second rags, right? This we all want him to succeed ultimately. And I don't think anybody wants Intel to go out of business except for the people who are just so distraught that they're not getting their dividend payment this quarter that they'd rather blow the whole thing up and what, sell off the assets. Well, Pat just did that because the foundry is probably going to be the most valuable part of that combined company for a long time to come, other than a patent portfolio that nobody's going to want to pay for. So, to all of those investors out there with itchy trigger fingers that's restarted the shot clock, be careful what you wish for Or, you know what? Just sell it and invest in, I don't know, canned food and shotguns.